Hey everybody, it's Thursday, February 19th. I'm Amy Evans and we're here for NA Lit Chat. That stands for New Adult Literature Chat, where we come talk about all of the things that affect new adult books, new adult authors, new adult bloggers, the entire business that surrounds new adult books. In case you're not familiar with New Adult usually features protagonists and characters in the age range between 18 and 25. Sort of that spot between high school and marriage where there's lots of time to make mistakes, lots of time to have fun, and lots of time for us as authors to make our characters do all kinds of crazy things. We always have lots of people who write lots of different things here tonight, here in general every week, and tonight we're really excited. We've got Michelle Files here with us tonight, and we've got RK Ryals here, and we are going to talk about protection. Usually when we are dealing with new adult, we talk about protection. It's usually about, condoms or sex education or any of those things. But this is about your books and your business and your brand. And how do you protect yourself from, sort of proactively? What are the things that you might want to consider doing? And how do you protect yourself in the future? How do you make sure that you can be in this for the long haul if that's what you would like to do? I'm so excited to introduce you guys to the people that we have here tonight because they both know a lot of good stuff about this topic. In particular, first up we've got RK Ryals. Hey RK, how are you tonight?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
I am good. Hey Michelle, where are you? Are you there?
Hello, I'm still here.
All right. So Michelle, Michelle has a new Twitter handle. So if you guys want to tweet at her, if you have questions, it's Michelle N Files, MICHELLENFILES. So say hey, tell her you're here, tell her you're listening, and ask any questions. Michelle was a CPA, or is technically a CPA as well as an author. Correct. What can you tell us about those two things and how they go together?
They don't. I have a good friend that always says that her favorite thing about me is I don't fit in a box. So she's like, you're not a typical accountant and you're not a typical author.
Well, you must be a really creative accountant.
I am, but not in the bad way, because, if you have creative accountants, you have Enron situations, and we don't want that.
There's a fine line. There's a way to be open-minded and still responsible, I think.
That's right. I follow the rules of accounting. And so that's what's really funny. Accounting lets me be that rule-based in the box, like do this in this order, because I'm really OCD and I like things organized. And my author hat lets me be creative and crazy. I mean, I don't plot my books, so it's really funny for me to put that creative side on because it's totally different from what everyone has known me my entire life. So
that's awesome. Tell us about your books.
I currently have one book out, Soul Survivor, which I published back in 2013. It's taken me a little while to get book 2 out because I've had some life issues. My husband passed away, for anyone that doesn't know, a while ago. But I've been doing really well with that, and I just want to say the book community has been phenomenal through that. All my family and friends have been amazing, but it's something when people you don't see every day make that extra effort to be there for you, and I will be forever grateful for the book world for that. So I just always have to say that because that's really important.
It is really important, and I met you at Utopia, and I've seen you and seen your posts, and I'm always amazed at how positive and romantic you stay, because I know that's a big life shock, and that's kind of like one of the things that's part of our conversation tonight, right? Like those things you can never prepare for that you want to prepare for, because they're the hardest to deal with sometimes.
They are.
To learn that firsthand.
Most definitely they are. So, but yeah, so Soul Survivor is a young adult paranormal romance, and I've finished book 2, sent it to the editor, but I'm just not happy with it. So I'm working out the kinks of book 2, but then this year I am also going to be releasing my first new adult book. There's actually going to be 3 of them, and it's going to be a contemporary romance series that's kind of set in a fictionalized version of my alma mater, where I went to college. So I'm really excited about that.
That is awesome. All right. Well, we are looking forward to all the stuff. I'm in the same place with you with the second book in the YA series. Sometimes the new adult can be a little bit easier to write. I'm not sure why, but they're both great.
Yeah, I don't know, but it is funny. Very different.
They're very different. Hey, RK, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you write and what you've done with your life before books and during books besides being an author.
Well, I write young adult and new adult paranormal romance and fantasy and contemporary romance. I have 13 books out at the moment, and I have been self-publishing since 2011. Before that, I was mainly a mom. I have 3 beautiful little girls, and I also worked with kindergarten students at one point and did secretary work before then. So most of my background is English because I went to college for English and being a mom, and that's been my biggest thing. But I do have 13 books out now, and I have been I have the Redemption series, which is my paranormal romance series, and then I have a contemporary romance, which is the Medicia series, and the Story of Awkward, which the Story of Awkward is sort of my big project at the moment because I'm having it illustrated. There's a sketchbook in that book, and there's an author illustrating it for me, and then I have another book called In the Land of Ravens that I wrote lyrics to a song to, and it is being produced at the moment, so I'm really excited about that. And that's where I'm at the moment. So
that's amazing. I love Story of Awkward, and I love that it's being illustrated right now, and I think that's super exciting. And I can't wait to hear that song.
I am really excited to share this song. Nicole Willard is the musician who's going to be singing it, and she's extremely talented, and I can't wait to share that. So hopefully it won't be too much longer, and I'm really excited about it.
That is so cool. Now, we've talked about having you on for various things, but over the year. But tonight, you have some really big news that you're celebrating that I feel like factors directly into this broadcast. Can you share your new good news about your corporation?
Yes, I recently formed Awkward Publications LLC, and I did it for numerous reasons. Because one, I wanted to separate my books from my personal life, and also because it has come to a point where I felt like I wanted to do a lot in the next coming years, and I wanted to do it under the protection of the LLC. So I really want to do a lot of charity work this year. I'm branching out into working with other type artists in the books. I'm writing the lyrics for In the Land of Fear and Ravens and having it produced, and so I want to bring a lot of that into my books and really open up a whole new world. And so I felt like I needed to do that in a broader spectrum than what I was doing before. So that's where Awkward Publications comes in. So I'm really excited.
That is awesome, and congratulations on that. And we are gonna take, we're gonna take a page out of that. We're gonna talk in a little while about why it might be the right time to incorporate, or what some of the benefits can be, and what some of the reasons not to might be. But first, we're going to check out good news from our Twitter audience. I know EJ's got a bunch of that. Hey, EJ.
Hey, what's up, guys? RK, I for one thing, that's the best name for a publishing house ever. And I know we're going to get this question from some smartasses on Twitter. Does Awkward Publications, are you looking for awkward authors? Because I think I know where a few are. Let's see. Good news. Twitter has lots of good stuff today. At Caitlin, I've always pronounced your name Caitlin Sneed, and I apologize, but now I'm looking at it like Sneed, so I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right at all. But anyways, Caitlin has some awesome news. Some good news to share this week. Heartsick is out in the world. It's speculative NA. I love seeing more spec NA, and we're seeing lots more like PNR stuff under new adult label, which is fantastic. And speaking of, Carrie Butler has good news that the last book in her Mark of the Nexus series, Loyalty, went up for pre-sale today. I know she's super excited that she started that, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. She started that series, and so finally the last chapter is coming up, so congratulations, Carrie. At Plin_Wright says, I revealed my new cover, and it went over well, so congrats on that. That's always a big deal. Like, that's always the first, sort of bravery hurdle you have to get over, is putting the cover out there and making sure people dig it. So that's big. At Right as Rain she says, oh me, I've got good news. I found out my romantic suspense NA, which is fantastic, romantic suspense, I'm digging already, NA Captive got picked up by Target. And she says she's screaming right now. I'd be screaming too.
I think that's awesome.
Right, I screamed a little when I saw it. So it's awesome.
Woohoo!
At Jennifer Pooley says, my good news is that book number 2 in the at KT Delante's NA series that I represent releases on Monday. So that's fantastic. So Jennifer, I think she's an agent as well. I think we had this conversation once. But anyways, that's awesome news. Always good. I know they get excited too when their clients have new books coming out. So good deal.
That's such good news all around from everybody. And I'm so curious to hear more about the Target story, because somehow, like, new adult suspense and Target, I'm like, wow, that seems like a really, not what I see on the bookshelves there, so maybe I just haven't looked in a while, and maybe there's more of it. I know there's a lot of new adult suspense that's really popular on Amazon, so it's great to see it getting in not just bookstores, but, mainstream big box stores as well. That's awesome. So we're talking about protection, and on a ground level, at the basic steps, when I say like protecting your books and your brand, Michelle, what are the things that come to mind for you that like you think absolutely every author needs to be aware of and should start thinking about even maybe before you publish?
Well, a lot of that legal stuff freaks me out. And I'm totally in a place where I work with attorneys every day and stuff like that. So there's definitely a lot of stuff to think about. But for me, and because I'm going to go back to tax because that's where I'm kind of comfortable at, there are a lot of things you need to be aware of when it comes to your tax return and your personal income taxes, or if you're setting up an LLC or some other type of entity, if you're going to go out with a corporation. There are a lot of things. It's like starting your own small business, and there's a lot of things you need to know, and it varies state to state. So one of the big things that I tell people that people kind of forget about is sales tax. So, like, if you're doing an event in your state and your state collects sales tax and you're not collecting sales tax at these events and you kind of like throwing that stuff out there, like that could be a big audit trigger and with your state taxing agency. So I think about the money. I think about, oh my gosh, like here are people who are, believe me, I know, are trying to pinch pennies to make this dream come true. And then all of a sudden you think, wow, I'm doing great. And then the auditors are knocking on your door and it's so not fun. So that's where my brain goes in protection. It's making yourself aware that you are a small business owner and you need to treat yourself as such. And that means you need to get educated as such.
And that doesn't always mean becoming an LLC or a corporation. Well, like I said, we're going to touch on that more later. But you can protect yourself like a small business owner with a personal account, kind of just by setting up a separate account. That's a good way to do it.
Exactly.
And when it comes to paying sales tax, I mean, I see a lot of authors, and I've done it myself, where I'll just say, like, okay, I'm at an event, like this book might be $10.95 plus tax on Amazon, but I'm going to give you guys a nice easy break of, $10 all in because we're at an event and I'm trying to give you a price. Now, does that mean that I am responsible for figuring out what the sales tax should be on that anyway, even if I'm not passing that charge to the customer? And then I need to deduct it and put that money somewhere or pay that money?
Exactly. So, like, what you have to do is you kind of have to back into what your real sales price is, and then you can figure out what your sales tax was on that sale. So, yes, you are still responsible for that.
And then, where do you send it?
Your state taxing authority. So,
and how often do you send it?
That depends.
Okay.
So that's one of those things where you need to make friends with an accountant.
Right.
Or if you have one, you need to definitely be bringing that up as soon as you're having book sales, period.
But that's
Because
something online that's taken care of for you, correct?
yeah, online
Yeah.
that's not an issue. But like if you're doing local events, or even, if you're doing different book events in different states, sometimes even if you're in a different state, they require you to collect sales tax for selling in their state. So those are things you kind of have to keep in the back of your brain when you're traveling and stuff as well.
And that's a good thing that you can always ask. They might not have an answer for you, but you can start by asking whoever's organizing the event that you're going to, because they should hopefully
Exactly.
want to find that out for, the sake of other authors and their events. I know that I just got a notice for an event that said that technically we may want to consider getting like a itinerant vendor's license for the event, because that is something that the state technically requires, although it's not always enforced, and the organizers wanted to let us know that it was something that existed and that they couldn't be held responsible if, for whatever reason, somebody came looking around for it. That was something I'd never considered, but obviously it's important.
And that's something you need to remember as well. Just because it's never been enforced before, we're in a time right now where a lot of the states' budgets are suffering. So they are going to be out there being more aggressive and more active looking for tax dollars. So even when people say, okay, this has never been enforced, don't necessarily think that you're going to be off scot-free either. So there's always a risk with that.
That's a really good point.
I love that Michelle started with that, because I asked on Twitter before we got started with all this, what are your like greatest fears, like financially, creatively, business planning wise, all that kind of good stuff. And Sophia Lira tweeted taxes. Like that's one of the first things we got back. I'm glad you started with that one. I was like, oh, you're right to be afraid, Sophia.
So, RK, how did you start to figure that stuff out when you've been doing this since 2011? So you've got 13 books out. I know you do some great events. Do you remember back when you started trying to figure all this out? Because you don't have the same, CPA. You're like me. Like, that's not our background. So we're kind of starting as entrepreneurs from square one.
Oh, I had none. Yeah, I'm afraid my first couple of events, it was more about the same way, just offer things for cheaper than you would do it on Amazon. And so, but I work with an accountant now, so that's been a real eye-opening thing. A lot of times she deals with most of that for me, so I don't have to put my head there. But as an author on the other end of the spectrum, when I came in, because I don't have any knowledge in that area, I guess my main concern when I first started publishing, my first thought was copyright. So, and when you publish, it automatically copyrights your stuff, but if you want to go to that extra mile, you can always go to the copyright.gov and register your book, do that kind of thing. That just protects you in a little bit more in depth. But that was my first concern, mainly because I didn't know anything about the tax part of this situation until I had to start using an accountant that year and then talk to her. And then she sort of was the one that walked me into the LLC, this year. But that's sort of where I started out. I was sort of more worried about my work at the time because I didn't have the CPA background, and I've had to work my way up from there.
Yeah, I'm with you. The one thing that I did have, my background is working in the entertainment industry, but after that I did start a company with my husband. We weren't married at the time, and we were doing mobile games and entertainment. And I always joke, we started the company the day the NASDAQ peaked in the internet boom. So we were like getting funded by an incubator, and they were setting us up to be, some sort of big, like, going public company. So they started the company with like 17 different QuickBooks departments and like more things on paper than we had even close to people. And it was so huge to try to get my head around that, because there were so many moving parts, and they were just trying to protect for the future. But it was a good lesson in like future proofing, because obviously I'm not going to start my own writer business that way, but it did open my eyes to the fact that, big businesses, when they start these, like, they are trying to make sure that there are places where they do collect taxes, or, where different departments can put money. And that to me, just kind of made me look at the different parts of my business and separate them out. So I have, like you're talking about, the copyright. I've got, like Michelle's talking about, sort of like going to places and doing sales, which is more like boutique-y or merchandising, I suppose. And then, you have the licensing sector, which is a big deal. What were you going to say?
Right.
On Twitter. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, RK. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's the licensing stuff. I'm still sort of going through that now. So now that the LLC and everything's been approved, so that's kind of a learning process for me, but it's been interesting.
And the one thing I think it's important for us to remember, we're so global on Twitter and everything. Sometimes we kind of forget that, we live in different states, different countries. It's really important to remember that something that might be perfectly for one author may not be advantageous to you at all in your state, because the LLC rules are governed by your state. So while certain states have really strict, good, stringent LLC laws that back up the business entity, but some states don't have that. And it's important to remember that just because someone in California is having really good, everybody's setting up LLCs doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you in your state. And that's why it's really important to talk to an accountant or an attorney in your area to see what's right for you, because it is different.
I agree with Michelle, and I would take that a step further, that if you can, go out of your way to find an accountant that specializes in, small businesses or freelancers. You're going to be getting 1099s from every company that sells your books. And if you have a traditional accountant that's only used to seeing one tax form from you, they might look at you funny. You want to make sure somebody can help you understand and be creative within the law, as Michelle and I were talking about just a few minutes ago. You don't ever want your accountant to be
We call that proper tax planning.
There you go.
I had to laugh at this. AnnGirl38 on Twitter said, "Can't we get some kind of tax exempt status for being gurus or something?"
I totally knight you to work on that, AnnGirl, and let us know what you come up with, because that's awesome.
Yeah, if you can become a writing guru, become tax exempt. So hypothetically, Michelle, say there's this guy that's an author that is married to a spouse in the military, and you move around a lot. Is there any, what hope do I have? I'm in a different state every 2 years, it seems like. But we do declare a home state of record, so our home state of record is actually Texas. So
then it's going to be based on what you consider your home state.
Okay.
I mean, that would be where you would go.
Right.
But,
and I ask that too. I'm joking. I mean, I'm not joking. I am a military spouse, and we do move a lot. But I know we do have a lot of military. We have several military spouses and military people on Twitter. So.
Yeah, that's just one of those things. It's definitely a sticky, unique situation. So it's always going to fall back to your home state. And, if you have the luxury of picking the best home state that works for you, then I say go for it. But because some states have better regulations than others.
Now, let me ask you something. I know that there was a time that it was beneficial to incorporate in, Delaware, and that's why, a whole bunch of companies are incorporated in Delaware, because the tax laws there for businesses were more advantageous than they were in, say, New York. I've heard that changes. Are there any states that are there any ways to do creative tax planning when it comes to setting up a company or a corporate structure in general? Is there a short answer that you can give if somebody was trying to consider that, or look for somebody like EJ? Would that be a good idea for him so he didn't have to worry about moving around all the time?
There's just so many laws and so many regulations out there. There is no way to shortcut that, and there's no way for me to give you a nice.
Got it.
I wish I could, but and if somebody does, please share that information, because it changes a lot. And again, it comes back to what kind of entity you want to end up being. Are you going to be an LLC? Is it better for you to be a corporation? There's all kinds of different things going on out there.
So let's talk about that then, because, it does keep coming up. Now, RK, you said that you finally took the plunge after almost 5 years in the indie community, because you were starting to work with other authors or other artists, and you wanted to be able to formalize those agreements. Is that right?
That's right. And also, I agree with Michelle. It depends on your state and who you talk to, because originally I had no plans to do an LLC, but the accountant, it really it helps to talk to your accountant in your state who knows what's going on in your home state, because if she's the one who suggested for the state of Mississippi for me to go in the way of LLC, and I do have so many more artists that I deal with at the moment than I ever did before my previous years of publishing. Now, not only did I work with cover models recently, but now it's musicians and artists and so many more people than I've had to deal with before. So it just seemed, when we talked, it was definitely the step that I needed to take, especially in my state, for the LLC. But Michelle's definitely right. You really want to check in to see what's better for you in the state that you live in.
So understanding that, in general, what are some protections that incorporating can give you? What are some of the reasons that you might even want to start to have that conversation and find out, here are some generalized items you need to find out exactly what that means in your state and what else this could affect?
I'm still working on a lot of it here, and I actually have another meeting with the accountant next week to talk a little bit more about what's going on for me. But the biggest thing for me was to separate my personal from my business too, because things have grown so much for me in the business area that it was becoming difficult to separate that from the personal. So, and with my husbands and things like that. So we both work, and she told me that for me the liability would be better for me in my state. So I'm still working on a lot of that because it's very, very new. I'm still even waiting for a lot of the paperwork. So, but it definitely looks like it's the right step for me where I'm at.
Got it.
And it's really interesting. Like personally for me, in West Virginia, it is not advantageous for me to be an LLC, because as a single member LLC, the only thing that it's going to protect me against is creditors. And right now, I don't have any creditors related to the business. Now, if I was in a situation where I was owing people money in the business, it might be and when I say the business, I'm saying author business.
Right.
But if I was in a situation where, I mean, all of my stuff, I'm paying my cover designer, I'm paying my editor, like I don't have outstanding debts with these people. I am not going to, buy anything on credit with them. So that is where it really wasn't a big deal for me, because I'm not cranking out a significant number of books. I'm not really like, when you're doing like 5 different things, it's hard to write 50 billion books in a year. But so personally for me, it didn't offer the protections that RK's getting in her state with her LLC. So there's also another type of entity that's called an S corporation, and it's treated very similar to an LLC, but it also gives a little bit more of that separation between your business and your personal assets.
So I've had all of these things. I've had an LLC a couple times, and we switched to an S corp for, another accountants. No offense, Michelle, but just like working with any other professional, like programmers or website designers, it's like all about opinions, and you're going to talk to one person that's got a great idea about what you should do, and then maybe you talk to the next person. We had one accountant who said be an LLC, and then we switched accountants, and that person's like, oh no, that was the world's worst advice. You have to go be a C corp or an S corp. So then we switched and did that, and it does offer some benefits for our family business, which is not exactly the same as my author business, but because both businesses deal with books, I am able to, I do a lot of the stuff that you're talking about where I might owe creditors, although I pay them immediately. I do that through that business because it's already set up and it's easy for me to do that. And there's an overlap with the end product, even though it's a little bit separate. But that's just because that structure was already in place, and right. I work for both. I'm not sure that I would have set that up for my author business if that did not exist.
Right. Right. And And you're right. There are so many opinions out there, and that's what makes it difficult. So you have to personally make that effort to make the research. And believe me, I teach accounting. I know people are not hardwired for accounting. I mean, I get it. And then accounting and then taxes, it is like so many different things going on there. So I totally understand it's difficult, but to protect yourself, you really need to make the effort to research things, to talk to more than one accountant, to talk to more than one attorney. So, you need to feel it out and get some different opinions. And when people give you an opinion, make sure you ask them why they think that's right. Don't just let them say, oh, LLC's the way to go or corporation's the way to go. Say, okay, why? What's the pros? What's the cons? I want to know why. And if you're dealing with a reputable person, an intelligent person who knows their stuff, they'll be able to give you an explanation.
That's very true. That's pretty much a good life lesson.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But one of the reasons that people do incorporate, and that is to protect their family assets from something that might come through the business. And I don't want to be like all about the fear factor here, because that's not the way that I operate, but we are talking about protection. And I've seen some really whacked out things happening over the past couple weeks just in various author groups that I'm in. People having cover designers tell them they're no longer able to use their covers even though they paid for them, and trying to put, in one case somebody was trying to put an agreement in place like after the fact, so the covers had been done and paid for and bought and used for a couple of years, and then they got in a tiff over something, and then the cover designer says, by the way, you can no longer use any of the designs, you can no longer imitate the designs, and this is an agreement based on the fact that you accepted my work and now you're reading this email. Okay. Reading an email does not constitute a legal agreement in any world that I've ever experienced. And I think that in that situation, the person who's kind of on the attack is going to have a hard time proving her case. However, the poor author on the receiving end, and there were more than one, is like flipping out, and understandably so, because book covers are not necessarily the most critical part of our work, but they are the most visible, and they're huge when it comes to branding, and there are so many little spots that you need to protect yourself for with them. First of all, if you have a cover designer, you want to know who owns the cover once it's done and paid for. Do you own it, or did they own it and you're only licensing it? And that's something to think of. If you've got cover art, the same thing. Did you properly license the images? Did you get the right license for that? Did you properly license the photography? Do you need to get a model release? These are like, we could go on for an entire night about protecting yourself just from images, but the point to make here is that do it right. Just like with the taxes, figure out what you need, figure out what the appropriate thing is. Don't use images of famous people unless you are literally paying and getting clearance from Brad Pitt to use his image in your marketing campaigns. Period.
Right.
It's a different thing if a fan makes you a teaser than if you make a teaser. And even that is a fine line when it comes to sharing that teaser. You might not want to put it on a website that you own. But if you want to tweet it out and say, great work, thanks, fan 101, maybe not so much a problem as, hey, buy my book, Brad Pitt's in it. That's problematic.
Well, I was just going to say, Michelle brought up, that made me think of what she said earlier about like how states now like don't assume that things that were previously ignored in tax law are now like are going to still be ignored because states are desperate for money or whatever. I think we kind of apply that same mentality sometimes as authors to the internet, because it's like an ocean. Like we're just in this huge ocean, and we think, oh, nobody's gonna know. Like no, who cares? Like is Brad Pitt really gonna care? I sell 20 books a year. Is he really gonna care if I put this on my Facebook promo thing or whatever? But the reality is yeah, like they search that crap out, man.
Well, it's automated. I had another case. Another friend was upset because they were approached by Getty, and Getty is a huge photo stock agency, and Getty said that they were using an image on their blog that was not, they didn't have the license for. And it turned out that the original author who provided that image did not get a proper license for it. But this blogger was on the receiving end of a very nasty letter and a demand for money. So just, when it comes to a simple way to protect yourself against any of that is to make sure that whoever you're working with and whatever they're doing, just make sure that you have permissions and contracts in whatever way you need to do that. I know when we did our box set, I did a box set with EJ and a few other people, and Alicia Cavansel designed the awesome cover for us, and she did the formatting, and she was very careful to make sure that every cover in there, the credits were listed, where the images came from were listed, and having everybody double check before she put that together that we had the proper rights and clearances. And I thought that was so smart. It really was a wake-up call for me, because she's a writer as well as a designer. She knows a lot more about those kinds of protections than I do. And EJ, you had an instance like that as well, right?
What? I apologize. I was tweeting.
Oh, it's okay. We're just talking about the different things that you need to do to protect yourself casually with images to the extent that you can, and making sure. You said that you worked with a cover designer that made sure you actually licensed the images. They didn't.
Oh
license
yeah. And she's in our audience, and I know Carrie won't mind if I give her a shout out for this. But Carrie Butler that we mentioned earlier, I worked with her, and she's part of the reason I worked with her on my last cover is because I know how meticulous she is. I do some other projects with her, and she's super picky about, wary of violating copyrights and all these things. And she does, cover design and stuff. But her solution to it as a designer was, she goes on stock image sites, she finds the photos, kind of does a mock-up, and then sends me to the site. And as the author, I actually buy I buy the photos from Deposit Photos. She doesn't do it for me. So I told Amy I appreciate that, because it doesn't leave me guessing if my cover designer actually covered all of her bases, and got the images that they're using from a legit source, because I think that's happened to some authors. They didn't know. They just assumed their cover designer was on the up and up, and then lo and behold, they see their image was not, legally paid for. But
the bottom line is that's on you.
Right, as the author,
Right.
absolutely.
So RK, you're now you're basically commissioning artwork, and that's taking cover designs and teaser designs times a million. How? I mean, if you don't mind going into some detail, what protections did you put in place for that, for yourself and your books?
Well, right now, Melissa and I, we're still in the beginning stages of it. So she is doing the artwork, and she will be the one. She's the owner of the artwork. So we'll be going through some contracts and things like that. And she and I are working very closely together. We're in several authors. So she and I have been really close friends since we first began. And she and I have come up with some things that we're going to work on together. And so without her permission, I'm not going to quite go into that.
That's okay.
Her stuff just yet, but because I haven't talked to her before I came on here. So, but she and I have we've got a very pretty tight deal right now at the moment. So, but I agree with you on the covers, because I work with some really great cover artists who have been really great about that, but I also have a photographer, because as I've released more and more books, I've wanted to use more of cover models on the cover, so I didn't have to worry quite so much with the stock image sites and the licensing, which you definitely want to cover if you do your covers, because you don't want people to come back and say, do you have the proper licensing? But with cover models, it's different too. You have to make sure you pay them, and you have to make sure. And then that's the reason why I went with the LLC too. Like Michelle said, when you have it all depends on how many books you have out, how many people you're working with. And when I first started out, it wasn't that many. And now, as the years have gone on, I'm up to 13 books. I'm up to this many cover models. I'm up to this, and this, and this. And it became a point where I needed to definitely take that to the next level at this point.
And that's awesome that you recognize that. But when you talk about the art that you're getting for the new book, you guys have had conversations. You might not have a contract drawn up yet, but you guys understand what your working relationship is going to be moving forward. You've taken those steps to protect each other in the project.
We have taken a lot of steps because even though it is definitely hard, it's inspired by the story of Awkward. So she's read the book several times. She's gone through it with a fine-tooth comb. We've talked about every art piece that she's done, and she's got a lot of art coming out. So we talk daily. It's probably 4 or 5 times a day, and it's definitely a very tight thing. Anytime you work with an artist, especially one on a book, you want to make sure that you're close to them as possible and you trust them. That's a big deal for me in my career since 2011. Like with my ARCs and everything, I have a very small group of trusted people. Most of the people that I work with I have known for years and years and years. Melissa Wright, the artist and author who's doing the work for the story of Awkward, is one of those people. She and I have been working together for a long, long time, and she works for several companies and knows a lot of things that I don't too, where she can kind of walk me through those steps. And I think that's important too, to work with people who know these kind of things and who know the type of steps to take. Whereas like someone like me who doesn't have that background, you want to make sure you ask the questions why and what and where and how. And I think that's very important, because if you don't ask those questions, you're never going to learn. And for me, I've had to learn it as I've gone, because I do not have a business degree and do not have a business background. So without asking those questions, you end up hurting yourself in the long run if you don't ask everybody questions and talk to more than one people. I've talked to at least 3 accountants, that kind of thing. You definitely want to ask more than one person.
Absolutely. And the one thing that
Several
I think,
opinions.
100%, I agree with that. And the other thing that I'll say when it comes to contracts and starting to get some protection for yourself is, a little bit of conversation, dialogue, and some back and forth emails to talk about like the what if situations can be priceless in life, in writing, in everything, because problems are never problems before they occur. Like, they might be worries and they might be points to discuss, but it is so much easier to say, hey, you want to write a book with me? Okay, here's what's going to happen. We're both going to go back and forth and half, and we're both going to chip in $100 for this, $100 for that, and $100 for this. The money's going to come through this account. It's going to be distributed this quickly, and we both own the copyright in perpetuity, and it really doesn't matter what happens. That's the way it's going to stay. Does that sound okay to you? Yeah, and here's some emails that sort of represent the nature of the email. It may or may not stand in a court of law. You probably would you probably would be smart to actually go and get a contract drawn up, because in the off chance that together you and that person create 50 Shades of Grey, like once money gets involved, people get a little crazy. But even for projects that don't go there, that you just want to keep a good working relationship, it can be so super helpful to just
paper trail.
Yeah, to have the paper trail and to talk through those things before they're issues. Do you, Michelle, have you ever had to deal with any, or sorry, what were you going to say?
That's okay. I actually have an amazing personal assistant too that I work with, and like you said, you definitely want to. I actually had a contract drawn up before I ever started working with her, and had to do all the legal stuff on it, and then had to have it notarized in both states and things like that. You definitely want to think about these things, because one thing that's my biggest fear is to have something happen with my work, things like that. So you want to work with people you trust and people who don't mind going through those processes.
Yeah, it's an investment for everybody, and if they're not willing to make it, then you have to consider that.
A shameless plug for when you bring up, it's come up 3 or 4 times now with our guests. I've heard you guys talking about, ask around, and it's why communities like NA Lit Chat exist. It's why there's so many great, Facebook author communities out there you can dial into, you can become a member of. There are many authors out there. Yeah, not all of them, but there are definitely more than plenty out there that are willing to help. And they may have some information that'll help you. They may be able to point you in the right direction. So, I mean, and the thing is that you learn, listening to RK, and all these things, like you're never as we're all newbies, like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, there are people like Michelle who have awesome backgrounds in business and stuff, but a lot of us don't, and that's not bad. Like, that's not a bad thing. Everybody has to start somewhere. So
sometimes having a background makes it even more dangerous.
I agree with that.
I could
Because
understand. You think
take things for granted, like you know what's going on, and then you're like,
Right.
wow, I really didn't know as much as I thought I did. So.
Right. But definitely reach out to people in these communities. Ask. You never know who you're bumping into that might have some answers.
And in that same token, it would probably be a good thing for you to kind of go to some of your local chamber meetings, because those would be good places for you to meet people in your community. You're an author. Treat yourself as a small business owner, because that's exactly what you are. So go to some of these chamber mixers and stuff and talk to people. That's where you meet professionals. That's where you learn about them. And that's where they're not, there with their business hats on. So you can kind of meet them personally, which is kind of like that's what I love about the author world, is because I walk in and it's not like all stiff. And so that's kind of a way for you to break out of that, get out of that comfort zone, because it is intimidating to go into an attorney's office or an accountant's office, and when you have no clue what you're about to ask, and these people are supposed to be these experts, and it gets scary, and I get that. So you need to try to get yourself out and be comfortable being around business professionals as well. Take yourself seriously and go out there and meet the serious people.
That I think is really good advice, and the best part about going to meet those serious people is if you do have a project in mind or a person in mind or something in mind that you are trying to do, especially contractually, you don't want to go meet a lawyer cold. You don't want to have to make it up on the spot and be like, I don't really know what I want, because they're going to charge you so much, and
yes.
what you want might be really simple. And I've seen a lot of friends, it doesn't really matter who you're trying to work with, just doing an informal, like, memorandum of understanding. They're called like MOUs, and it basically just says, like, we want to do this together, and I'm here and you're here, and we might need a lawyer at some point for fancy language and stuff, but we basically are just getting on the same page, and that's helpful if you want to bring a model to an event. If you're gonna, I know there were a couple models that just went on Book Splash with various authors. I don't really know what they did in advance of that, but that's a lot of time on a boat, and I don't know, do you get meals with the model? Just, like, do they have to go out at night? I don't know. I've never done that, but I would think if I was going to pay to bring a model there, these are all things I might want to know. My husband might want to know them as well, but I want to know.
Is there a fancy underwear fee? Like, there's all these questions when it comes to models.
I would want to know what the problems are. Or,
who applies the oil? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, like, do I get sunscreen? Is that part of our deal?
Right.
If it's not, we're gonna have a problem.
Do they require food and water?
Exactly. Like, yes. Are you covering all their expenses, or are they just psyched to have the ticket there, and then the rest is on them? Like, basic questions. But what if you don't talk about this beforehand? It's just one of those rules of thumb with everything. And sometimes it can be a simple way. I'm just going to use a generic example that people come to us because of NA Lit Chat with all kinds of interesting questions, and sometimes we have answers and sometimes we just throw them out. But, some agencies have contracts. Some agents will lock you in before they'll send your book anywhere. Other agencies don't work like that, and they'll send your book out and they'll sign a contract with you when you're actually signing a publishing deal. And both of these are sort of accepted in the industry, but you still want to know, like, make sure you ask that agent and get in writing, like, okay, maybe we don't need a contract because that really ties you up as much as it ties them up, if not, more. But what are the percentages going to be if you get a deal, and are there going to be any expenses that you're going to be responsible for? It's a simple email, like, hey, I'm sort of new at this. I understand that we're just feeling each other out, but what percentage are you going to take if we get, like, on the best, I'm thinking best case scenario here, what percentage does your agency take, and are there any other fees I should be made aware of when this book sells? And they might come back to you and they might say, like, 15% is industry standard, so of course that's what we do here, and you're going to have to pay for, like, any FedExes and office expenses, and they're never more than X dollars a month and we'll detail them out for you. And you're like, great, I know what the deal is, because otherwise you might go into that situation and be like, oh, I don't want to ask her for a contract, but what if they charge me what if they sell my book and then they want 80%, and gosh, that's totally understandable because you want the help in selling your book, and it's hard to push. It can be hard to push for a full contract, and maybe that's not what you need. Maybe you just need those basic questions answered so you have that peace of mind. Maybe, lots of agents do sign contracts, some don't. The point is, find out what's most important to you before you get into any relationship or any, before you're working with anybody for anything. Get those questions answered and, have a place to start from. And then if you need actual lawyer contracts, then lawyer up and get it done. It can save you a lot of money on the flip side. And as Michelle said, you are a small business, so that's one of the ways that you can act like it. So we have.
It really pays to be an overthinker.
That's what I'm taking away from tonight. Just analyze the hell out of everything. Before you do it, you
everything.
I would say
seriously.
I'm a Libra, so I see your side of things, my side of things, and 15 other sides nobody's ever thought about or has time to think about. That sort of comes in handy because then it lets me be optimistic. Because I'm like, okay, well, I've already thought about. I'm not always right. There are always more ways things can go wrong. But I like to think I've already thought about a lot of them.
Right. Amy just likes to smile smugly when it does go wrong and be like, see, I knew that was going to happen. I knew it. But she doesn't avoid any of it. She just knows that she sees it coming. That's all.
I'm old, okay? I've been there a couple of times. And sometimes I would encourage everybody to remember that. You might be dealing with people who might, have only, being an author is their first job. Or you might be dealing with somebody like Michelle who, knows her what about this stuff. So make sure you understand so that you can get the benefit of that relationship, whether it's because it's fresh and new and I don't know what the right word is, but optimistic or, has the value of experience. Know who you're dealing with, know what their priorities are, make sure they're in line with yours. And that's essentially what a contract is supposed to be all about. It's the communication part that protects you as much as the legal language, which can be expensive to buy, but ultimately it saves you money.
And Michelle said something earlier that really rung true, and it's a theme that we've heard woven in and out of this stuff as we've talked about it over the weeks, is take yourself seriously. You're a business. If you view yourself as a business, you're going to take precautions. The more seriously you take this, the more precautions you're going to take. And the more protected you'll be, because I think we all have these fears. We all have these fears we're going to screw up with a contract, or we're going to, violate some copyright thing, or whatever. That's normal. That's all natural fears that we probably should have. But I think the more steps you take and the more seriously you take yourself, I think the less time you'll spend agonizing over that stuff eventually.
I think that's true. And let's be real here, and I want some input here from our guests tonight. If, businesses, they start small and they grow bigger. So your first year revenues, are hopefully very different from what your 5-year revenues are going to be. But realistically, whatever you need to do to make that initial seed investment in your business, it's not unrealistic to think, well, my first year I paid $30 for the rights to some images. I tried to do my covers on the cheap. I didn't really pay attention to much, but I do know that I have the contracts and the rights to use them. Your second year, you might find yourself needing a more substantial contract because you're spending more to get better covers and you are going to cover models. And then your third year, you might finally be cash flow positive, and then you do need an accountant, or you need a tax attorney, or you need a contract attorney. And I think my point here is that every year you should be looking at a portion of your expenses to go into protective services. We can just put a general umbrella term on it. And I'd love to know what you guys think, a good rule of thumb is, because as your business grows, your needs are going to grow, and your needs to protect that are going to grow. I mean, when we first started as an LLC, my accounting for our regular business, I can tell you we pay 10 times more now per year than we did at the beginning, but thank goodness, like our profits and our revenue has grown by the same number. So what's a good rule of thumb? Like if you were going to tell people to set aside some money to protect themselves, or to consider like, 20% of whatever money comes in should be going to taxes and legal services. This isn't even about paying your taxes. It's just about like educating yourself. Is there some advice that you could give people so that they can grow their businesses intelligently? Michelle, do you want to take that? I know it's a general question. I'm trying to give you guys room
first
to
of all,
answer.
First of all, remember, the accountants do work outside of January to April 15th. So and accountants can be more than just a tax advisor. I mean, I have worked in an accounting firm, which I'm still kind of pitch hitting at, and hopefully I will be done there at the end of this tax season. But what I've learned most is the partners that work in my accounting firm, they are like business advisors to their small business clients. So don't wait until the end of the year to go knocking on an accountant's door. The best thing you can do for yourself is if you see things starting to take off, and let's say it's June, and you're like, wow, my book sales have just like tripled. Things are really getting out of control. This is amazing. Call an accountant and go in and sit down and talk to them, because they're going to be able to look at you at that point and say, okay, well, this is what your, income tax wise, this is what your taxes look like before. This is you have totally changed your financial picture, and these are things we can do to plan to get you ready for the end of the year. Then at the same time, you'll already be in contact with someone who can help you be like, okay, were you filing your stuff with the state agencies like you need to be? Have you thought about protecting yourselves? Like if you're going to a good accountant, these are all the kinds of things that they're going to start asking you. So then it's going to kind of give you that jump start, and they'll be able to give you those outlets and send you places so you know kind of where to start looking in the right direction. So to me, if you see things starting to take off, then don't wait. Don't think it's going to go away, because let's hope it doesn't. Get yourself in with a financial person, like, an accountant or even a financial advisor. There are things that you need to...
A guru, if you will.
Yeah, just get in there and just even open the floor, because you know what? A good accountant, if they can't help you or they're not the right fit for you, they will tell you that. Or they might say, maybe you're not ready to talk to us because we're a firm that charges ridiculous fees to do returns, like you're going to have. But there's Joe Smo, who's a phenomenal accountant who works with, people in your income range or, in your situation or your types of businesses. So that's something to remember. Don't wait until the end of the year and look back and say, wow, look what we did, before you do anything about it.
That is really amazing advice, and I think that is one of the critical differences when you have to switch your headspace from being, an entrepreneur or a small business owner. When you're just working for somebody else and paying taxes on April 15th, and maybe doing it yourself online. You're making money all year. You want to be protecting your money all year. And I think that is just awesome advice from Michelle. What about you, RK? Like, what would you recommend for people as they grow their businesses? How do they think this through? How do they budget? How do they figure out how much time and money they need to spend protecting themselves?
I'm a firm believer in putting back, because my husband does work in a job that sometimes there's layoffs, and so you have time. So and it's the same in the author world when your first year, when you don't make much and things like that, or if you're one of those who just makes a lot in your first year, that's amazing. But if you're like me in the first year where it wasn't that big a deal, but for someone who doesn't have a business background like me, it's key to ask questions. If you get an email you don't understand, I'm like Michelle said, call an accountant, call a lawyer, whatever depends on if you decide you're going to do this with somebody else, get a personal assistant. Make sure you call somebody who knows something about contracts for that. If you're going to use stock images or something, make sure you check into your licenses. You overthink everything and you ask a lot of questions. I mean, even the littlest stuff, like I'm really big on doing giveaways as a part of, not only do I like to give back, but also because it really is a good marketing tool. And I use Amazon a lot because, you know, it's just easy to drop ship. You know, say, hey, I'm going to give away this pair of socks. It's on Amazon. Let me go ship it. But then you get emails later on in the year, you know, Amazon isn't required to do use tax for like South Carolina. You have to pay that. You know, it's the littlest things that you learn as you go. With it, I never would have thought that when I was doing giveaways, you know, and using Amazon for this, and they don't have to collect this kind of tax from this state or this state. And you know, you pick up the phone, call an accountant, do this, do that. Make sure you ask your questions as you get emails. If you don't understand it, don't delete it. Don't put it, archive it. Make a phone call. I think that is so important when you're doing something, especially when you don't have a background in it. Surround yourself with people who know what kind of contracts to draw up, what kind of taxes to pay, and where you need to go and do that, because you don't want to later on hurt yourself in the long run. And put money back in case you have to pay so much in at the end of the year or do this kind of thing. Make sure you blanket yourself.
That's really good advice. I think that any small, or any, you know, as a self-employed person, you have to pay self-employment tax differently than regular people pay, like, tax out of their paycheck. And you need advice on that. Basically, as soon as you start being the tiniest bit profitable, you want to start protecting that income, because that way you can grow your income.
We had one last quick question from Twitter I wanted to throw out, and it may not be able to be answered quickly. We'll have to get off here in a minute. But Deidre Spark asked, you know, so you're at the point where you feel like you should get a hold of, you know, a financial advisor, an accountant, a guru. What's the difference? Like, is there a quick definition, Michelle, between like who does what? Is an accountant the same thing as a financial advisor? Do they do the same roles? Or are they different?
Okay, so an accountant is someone that definitely is the tax realm, and they can help you with all your business needs, like your immediate business needs to begin with. And I can tell you, accountants charge less by the hour than an attorney does. Sometimes it's still pretty pricey, but you're going to pay an accountant less than you will an attorney. Then, if you have a lot of money that you want to invest, you want to go to the financial advisor. And obviously, if you're dealing with legal things or things, your accountant will say, I can't help you with this, you need to seek an attorney. So, and attorneys and accountants often work together. So those are kind of like little rough, I guess, definitions of where to go. But I don't know. Hey, just direct message me, tweet me. I'll tell you where you should go.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. We've had Michelle Ryals here tonight talking about being an author and bringing her CPA background, which has been amazing. We've had RK Ryals here tonight, who's also an author and who just started an LLC and has been kind enough to share some of the thoughts that went into that. If you guys have any questions for either one of these ladies, I'm sure if you tag them in a tweet, they'd be happy to help you answer it or point you in the right direction. The same is always true for all of us here at NA Lit Chat. Thank you to ST and Kat and Chris and Lindsay, who are on the ground in Twitter with everybody. Thanks to everybody who's been tweeting and listening. Thank you, EJ Wesley. I don't know where you disappeared on me, but EJ is a founder of the program, and he's here tonight offering all kinds of good questions and advice. And that's it for tonight, February 19th. We will see you guys next week on Twitter, and we will be having one last broadcast of all the different ways you can make money in this business, all the things that you want to do to draw every bit of that, every bit of income towards you so that you can achieve your dreams here, whatever they may be, whether it's paying for more advertising or going full-time to support your family with your writing. There's more than one income stream out there that can take you to it, and we're going to talk about those next Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, everybody. This is Amy Evans. Have a great night.